technical hitch to be dealt with. The answer to the question that had been asked is the call. We are recording this call for posterity purposes, of course. And I guess we shall have later, before any publication or something, there shall be some form of consent on what can be put out and what cannot be put out, in case there's any reservations towards that. At the moment, allow me to introduce some of our guests for today. We have with us representatives from different embassies and organizations. And I would like to start with just mentioning all their names and then allowing them each a few minutes to say something. So with us today, we have the pleasure of having the Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Kenya, Maarten Brouwer. We also have the Regional Director for Hivos East Africa, Mendy Njonjo. We have the Deputy High Commission of Canada to Kenya, David Da Silva. And we have Deputy High Commission of Australia to Kenya, Linda Gellard. Thank you for joining us today. And I would like to invite the Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Kenya, Maarten Brouwer, to say a few words.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to join this webinar. I'm really honored and to associate myself also with the group. You're doing so much good work. And it is now the second year that we're not able to do any physical activities to mark the day. But still, to be here then in this way is the second best solution, but it is a solution and I'm happy to do so. And to be with you and the LGBTI leaders and allies, really helpful. I think you know that also during my the period of my predecessor and already for a very long time, the Netherlands is really a friend to the movement and to the cases of the IDAHOT. We think really that non-discrimination and equal rights for LGBTI persons is a key human right. And therefore, we have in nearly all countries that we work, we have contacts and contracts and activities with NGOs, activists, fellow governments around the world. We really want to make sure that this is seen as a key human rights priority. And we will continue also with the agenda at home, because not everything is perfect in the Netherlands, and there's still a lot of work, especially for the LGBTI community, to be done in the Netherlands. In Kenya, we're very happy to work with GOG in co-chairing the SOGI forum, bringing UN organizations and NGOs, activists, embassies, and whoever wants to express himself on the issue, to work with them, discuss relevant developments, and take careful note, and also bring that in the human rights discussions that we have also in international fora. But not only there, also in practice, in the bilateral context, what we can do, we will try to do. It is by working together, comparing notes and listening to each other that we can all play our part to ensure non-discrimination of LGBTI persons. And that really is a priority, as I said. Now, this year's theme of IDAHOT is Together Resisting, Supporting and Healing. And we've been thinking very much about this healing, because what does it actually mean? We are very, very much aware of the fact that many people in the LGBTI community and also their leaders are often under stress, sometimes for long periods. And that makes that you sometimes have to relieve yourself from that stress. And mental health is therefore an important issue. And we think that that is an issue that we would like to put emphasis on in this year. So mental health, psychosocial support is an issue not only for this community, broader, also for refugees, for instance, and in humanitarian work. We want to stress the issue of mental health and the fact that we have a strong feeling that that is underserved in many of the programs that address the issue of the LGBTI community. The magnitude of the challenges faced, individual pressure on leaders in your communities can really become too much for persons. So if we can address the mental health issues, and if we can make sure that they feel more comfortable and feel safer, not only the leaders, but everyone in the community, I think that will be great. And all kind of suggestions that you may bring up during this webinar, in the interchanging the dialogues with all participants during and even later this week and during this webinar, I think would provide an opportunity to learn from each other and to help relieving the needs. So this webinar is about this leading in crisis, and I can only thank you for doing that. So important that there is leadership in any crisis, but also this crisis, because the acceptance of the LGBTI community is still an issue that deserves all our attention. So I encourage you very much to continue the work and highlight that also in the Netherlands. I will personally also make sure that it is known what the community in Kenya is facing and how you're dealing with that. And you'll find an ally in us as an embassy and in me as a person. So I wish you all the best with this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those encouraging words. Next, we have the Regional Director, Hivos East Africa, Mendi Njonjo. Hello.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So Your Excellencies, partners, allies, and friends in the afternoon, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to join you this afternoon to celebrate IDAHOT 2021. So as Jackson mentioned, my name is Mendi. I'm the Regional Director for Hivos in East Africa, and my pronouns are she, her. So Hivos is an international development organization that is guided by humanist values, and together with citizens and their organizations, we aim to contribute, excuse me, towards just, inclusive, and life-sustaining societies where people have equal access to opportunities, rights, and resources. And we do this in partnership with others in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and Latin America on our impact areas of civic rights, gender equality, diversity and inclusion, and climate justice. So this year's theme of resisting, supporting, healing is really reflected in the work that we do, where we champion equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of all people, regardless of gender, sex, sexual orientation, identity, expression, or sex characteristics, ethnicity, age, ability, religion, and culture. And we recognize that every person has multiple identity that factor and impact who they are, their participation and agency. So in particular, young women and LGBTQIQ+ people are at the center of and inspire Hivos' program and partnership. So our commitment to gender equality, diversity, and inclusion is seen in programs like the Free to Be Me program that we are kicking off with the generous support of the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is seeking to really support the movement building and maintenance of diverse LGBTIQ+ organizations and activists who are advocating for their human and socioeconomic rights. Additionally, we also work on the We Lead program, which seeks to strengthen and influence the position of young women and adolescent girls, especially LBQ women, whose sexual and reproductive health and rights are neglected the most. And then last but not least, we also work on the Voice program, which is a tender that Oxfam Novib and Hivos run on behalf of the Dutch Ministry of the Foreign Affairs. And Voice stands for a world where empowered right holders are able to express their views and demand their right to responsive and inclusive societies. Now, I was asked to reflect on what the pandemic has basically taught me about leadership, as well as also what the pandemic has also inspired some sort of change in the style of leadership during this rather fraught period. I think for me, what the pandemic has done is that it has really reaffirmed that what truly matters, what always mattered, was the well-being of staff and the community members on whose behalf we serve. It's also like underscored once again that a lot of the inequality that we seek to counter every day, all of us who are seated around the table, the pandemic just exposed the fault lines that really underscore just how inequality comes from one central place. And if there's anything that I hope that this pandemic has taught me about leadership, is that if we are to make any dent on some of like these really huge structural issues that we all seek to counter, it has to be by helping leaders, helping movements in terms of becoming more resilient people, more resilient organizations. And I feel this is something that as Hivos, we are called to do, and I think for people also sitting across the room. So with those relatively few remarks, I will hand over back to you, Jackson, and looking forward to IDAHOT 2021. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Up next, we have Deputy High Commissioner, High Commission of Canada to Kenya, David De Silva. David.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy IDAHOT. Bonjour, hamjambo. I'm honored and proud to join representatives from like-minded countries, from civil society, friends and members of the LGBTI community to celebrate IDAHOT today. And I look forward to the panel and discussing leadership in a time of crisis. I think it's very apt, and as the Dutch ambassador mentioned, leadership means taking care of health, mental health, and the like. 3 quick points that I wanted to make today. The first is that I can't help but point out that IDAHOT, or how it was originally called, IDAHOT, was actually a Canadian invention. In 2003, Fondation Emergence, it's a Canadian NGO, conceived and organized the first ever National Day Against Homophobia. The idea became popular, and within a few years, this International Day was being observed in a number of countries, and in alignment with the idea of inclusion and diversity, we've changed the name over the years too, from IDAHOT to now IDAHOT, which I believe is an Australian contribution. Canada is really proud to have been a key contributor to the growth of this global movement and to recognize and support this very important community. We also take this opportunity to reaffirm a principle to which we are deeply committed, and that's that no one should be subjected to discrimination or violence because of their sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual characteristics. In the words of our Prime Minister, who proudly calls himself a feminist and regularly marches in every Pride march that he can possibly get himself into, in Canada. Everyone deserves to live free of stigma, persecution, and discrimination, no matter who they are or whom they love. The second point I wanted to make was about today's theme, together, resisting, supporting, and healing. The Dutch ambassador talked about mental health and the healing aspect of that. What I would like to bring to the conversation is being authentic. At the moment, I'm acting High Commissioner, so I will be High Commissioner for 5-6 months perhaps. And so leadership is something that has to come from inside. It's going to change with each person. It's going to change with the circumstances you react to and that you're faced with. In the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that the pandemic itself has had a disproportionate impact on LGBTI persons due to marginalization, due to discrimination, and other factors. Even in Canada, we still don't fully understand the reasons why, but members of the LGBTI community are not seeking healthcare as frequently as others, and they're not taking the vaccine as frequently as others. And these come to reasons of marginalization, discrimination, perhaps lack of faith in government or in the medical system. In light of this, we urge all governments and all those on the call today to think about the measures and policies that we can all do, including in promoting access to healthcare, information, housing, financial sector, economic support, and take into the account the needs of LGBTI persons in a proactive and a non-discriminatory way. The third thing that I wanted to say is thank you. Thank you to all the people that are on the call today. Thank you for your efforts, your courage, your passion, your energy. Leadership can be enormously energizing, but can also be enormously draining at the same time. You're giving a part of you to a cause that you deeply believe in. I am constantly impressed and amazed at the way that people on this call and in general LGBTI persons across the region promote and protect rights, challenge laws, empower grassroots organizations to provide safe spaces, access to information and healthcare, and protect human rights defenders, and also speak up in the most basic forms, speaking up against discrimination, hate propaganda, and hate crimes. Although it might seem that the steps are small, they are important. Canada is very happy to support regional discussions and sharing of lessons on this, and understanding that each country is at a different stage in what we hope is a journey to greater respect for LGBTI rights. Our approach is the same approach that I would advocate on leadership. Find something that suits you. Find something that draws on your strengths, on your reserves, on your courage, on your passion, and make it really be a part of you. I believe, as far as I'm aware, I am the first acting, but High Commissioner for Canada who is openly queer at this mission. That is progress. Progress comes in small steps. And so I am impressed and amazed at the courage and energy that all of you bring to this discussion and to your everyday actions. And I urge you to take simple acts of love, whether that's picking up a phone or sending a text or scheduling a walk or a virtual chat to offer support to each other. That community and supporting each other is very, very important when you're steering a ship. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have Deputy High Commissioner, High Commission of Australia to Kenya, Linda Jalad. I believe the microphone is on mute.
I think we're now all good, Jackson. Thank you. Yes, I wanted to thank my fellow panelists and everyone else who's joined us today. It's a real honour to be here to be representing Australia at this forum. Australia's really committed to human rights and respect and acceptance, and LGBTI plus communities are a really important part of that. So we are working at all levels of government to promote human rights and the rights of LGBTI communities. And it's a key part of Australia's engagement globally. But I guess I wanted to also recognise a bit something similar to what my colleague David De Silva has mentioned, that in Australia we also recognise that we have a long way to go. A few years ago in 2017, we had a vote for marriage equality, and it was a really special time in Australia. It was a wonderful day. I took my children out with me to post our vote. It was a postal ballot, and people kind of really celebrated with their families in their own way about how they were going to vote and how we could feed into this experience. But I guess all of that just to say that that was 2017 in Australia, and it's extraordinary to me that that is just so recent that we now have marriage equality. It's a really wonderful thing, but I did want to recognise that in Australia we also recognise that we have a really long way to go. In terms of the themes today, in terms of resisting and healing and supporting, I wanted to, I guess, talk about my contribution today, which is what all of the allies can do to support our friends, to support our colleagues, and to support our family members who identify as LGBTQ plus as part of that community, and to see if there's ways that I can do better. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you all. And as my colleagues and my panelists have mentioned, thank you all for all of your hard work, which I find really inspirational, and being as you go on the front line every day to try and make the world a better place for all of us, and as we all try and lift each other up together. So thank you so much, Jackson, and to everyone else. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Two things I'd just like that I took note of from the speeches from their excellencies and from the regional director for Hivos is that there remains support from across the globe for our communities and our movements. And the problems that we face in East Africa, and perhaps we'll hear from Indonesia as well, are also problems that are kind of still being faced in the Netherlands, in Canada, in Australia. And so the need for togetherness, the need for resistance is still global, and the fight continues. Before we move on to the next bit of today's program, I'd like to take a step back and just, we now have Levis, who's able to come in and say something on behalf of our hosts for today. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Jackson. Thank you so much, the High Commissioners, Hivos. Technology is very interesting. You know, everything works really well when you're practicing it until the day of. And then it reminded me of a story in the Bible about a gentleman called Moses. So he was leading the children of Israel to Canaan, but he never reached there himself. And I almost felt the same way, you know, bringing people and not being able to really partake of this. But I'm so grateful I'm back. And first and foremost, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank the Canadian High Commission, the Australian Embassy, the Dutch Embassy, Hivos and Voice for bringing us together today. It gives me a lot of joy as the co-founder of Sullivan Reed to be able to really see how collaboration and allies are coming together to really tackle LGBTI inclusion within our own countries, within our spaces, our homes, our churches, and different areas where we find ourselves in. as I was just reflecting about leadership in crisis, I thought about when the pandemic started and how different leaders in the world approached it. And studies have shown that the women leaders did a better job than the men in terms of handling the pandemic. It's a fact, there's studies shown on that. And I was also wondering, did the LGBTI, sort of leaders also take up the mantle and led with empathy and vulnerability and humanity in the process of this work. As I thought about myself as an LGBTIQ leader in this space, I thought about my personal struggles with the pandemic, from mental health to loneliness, to adding a weight, it's good that you can only see just this upper part, all those struggles really of the pandemic. And so there are those personal struggles. And then also there's the community struggles. And we were working at the time, I remember we were doing a program with Voice, working with university students, and stories of young people who are back home to homophobic parents, stories of parents who have refused to pay school fees for kids, stories of where, because it was just stories after stories of difficult times. But in the midst of all that, there's also stories of resilience, stories of overcoming, stories of togetherness. And I'm reminded also of allies, people who sometimes we forget. These are, your cisgendered heterosexual people, right? Who are coming together and saying, I see you, I hear you, and I am here for you. And so my message really is to tell the LGBTI community that we are not alone. We have a whole army of allies who are seeing us and are supporting us and are standing with us. And as we continue with these conversations in the panel sessions, as we see what leaders have innovated, what they have done within the different spaces, how they've managed to overcome their own personal challenges and also rising up to the challenge and working with communities and adjusting to these digital platforms and other ways. I am thoroughly excited again to welcome you and to invite you in this conversation. And thank you so much for our partners and supporters and the panelists and the audience and the participants. I am thoroughly excited and I'm looking forward to fantastic conversations. I can talk the whole day, but this is not my time to shine. So I will let the panelists really, have this. Jackson, back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that awesome. I knew we missed out when you couldn't join us earlier. So thank you for coming in and bringing that energy with you. So we are going to go right into introducing the panelists for today. And as you can see in the program, I don't know if we have the program shared, but we have 4 panelists who are leaders of different organizations across Tanzania, Kenya, and Indonesia. I will just do a very brief intro about them, but then I would like for them to also just say out the names as they say out their pronouns, their preferred pronouns to you before the discussion starts. So our first panelist is Sarah Kagendo of Leha Group, which is an LBQ group in Kenya, where she is the director. Sarah, please just come in and let us know your pronouns. We normally have our pronouns written in this Zoom calls on our text, but I think we can try out people saying it out. I think there's power in voice.
Hello everyone. So good afternoon from this side. My name is Sarah Kagendo. My pronouns are they, them. I am a director in LEHA, which is an LBQ organization that deals, or rather advocates for the rights of the LBQ persons in the rural areas of central Kenya. And I'm really excited to be here and just to have a conversation around, around the works that has happened, and also to share this day of IDAHOT with you, which is, it's more of Christmas to me. And yeah, you can hear a little bit of celebrations here and there. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Then we have John Kashiha of Center in Tanzania. John? Your microphone is on mute, John.
Okay, now you got me? Okay. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone is okay. My name is John Kashiha, and I'm a program director to an organization called the Center. Formerly, it was known as the CHESA. And my pronouns, you can call me he, she, it, they, we, wa, wo, wherever you find it, because being sexual orientation is so dynamic. Gender and sexual orientation is quite dynamic. So you can call me anything. It's lovely to be here and to share my experience around the pandemic in this season of IDAHOT, but moreover to learn from the other leaders within the Africa, but on previous ambassadors and deputy ambassadors who have been actually provide their statement in regards to the IDAHOT, but moreover in a season of the pandemic. So I'm eager to learn everything from them or from different panelists and other participants who actually participated in this meeting. Yeah.
Thank you very much, John. Then we have Jonta Saragi, who from Outright International in Indonesia. Jonta Saragi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I go by he and him. Thank you for having me, because I realize that I'm actually from the other part of the world, which is Indonesia. I'm based in Jakarta. Currently, I'm working for Outright Action International as the program officer for the country. But before, for a couple of years, I've been working for Hivos Southeast Asia, working in the issues of rights, inclusion, and diversity for LGBTIQ groups in the country as well. I'm really interested to know what happens, how the leaders in East Africa and other regions are actually navigating their work and also their communities in regards with the situations with the pandemic, and also really being really honored to be part of the discussions and part of the group tonight. Good evening from Indonesia.
Good evening. Thank you. And finally, we have Lorna Diaz from GALC here in Kenya.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lorna Diaz. I'm the executive coordinator of the Gay and Lesbian Coalition of Kenya, pronouns she, her. Oh, this is lovely. This is lovely. I'm so happy to be here. And as other panelists have said, I'm very eager to hear what other leaders have gone through in now what seems like the second year in a row, given the fact that the first year was hell. So let's, I'm glad, very glad.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I guess we're ready to delve right into the minds of these four great leaders and hear what they have to tell us about their experience during this pandemic. So we have a bit of time, and I am thinking of how best to approach the questions. So my first question would go to John. And the question would be just to tell us, you touched on it as you're doing your introduction, your experience on leading as a leader of center, as a Tanzanian community leader during the pandemic. Please tell us a bit about your experience. John? I think you're on mute if you are trying to speak. Hello? Okay, are you there, John?
Sorry, is it me, Jonta, or the other
No.
John?
No, it's John Kashiha, sorry. Okay, I think there is a bit of technical difficulty. John Tasaragi, you can take it. So the same question, your experience on leading during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right. Okay. Finally, the question goes to me. Oh, well, in the beginning, it was really actually very difficult, especially when it was the first 3 months of the pandemic happened last year. I still remember we closed the office of Hivos in 16th of March last year. And then all of the LGBTIQ organizations that I know of across the country in Indonesia came to me and then asking for help, and especially our trans folks that are actually working on the street as as street singers or as sex workers are really were really facing difficult situations, and they couldn't even provide their food or their shelters, and they were really struggling. And then back at that time, I was really wanted to be such a help for them, but then it was really a bit difficult because back then I was leading the project of Strong in Diversity, which was also implemented in Kenya, supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands back then. And then it was really difficult to actually sweep the funding from engaging with religious leaders and journalists and other work that are already set from the beginning of the project to providing humanitarian supports to LGBTIQ communities that are in need. So it was actually taking a lot of work to ensure that we can somehow sweep the projects and the activities to providing immediate and urgent needs to our LGBTIQ folks that are in needs, and then trying to also do some study, like a quick study, who are actually in needs in different areas in the country. And finally, back then, we actually successfully be able to sweep some of our activities and to provide some of the funding that we got from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to support direct needs to the LGBTIQ, particularly the trans folks in needs back then. But then the soon that some of the LGBTIQ organizations in the country that we supported got the funding, some others are actually asking for the same thing, and then it was also huge. And then it was a little bit difficult to actually navigate around how we can actually provide the helps and the assistance to all of the community members that are in need back then. But then I think one thing that we need to somehow do, especially as leaders, and to also communicate and to communicate what actually the community members are actually needed, and to be able to communicate that to the donors and also potential donors or potential resources that might be having some pockets of funding to be able to somehow support these communities. Especially, for example, I can tell you about our emergency response at the moment in within Outright Action International. We actually try to provide that support to LGBTIQ organizations around the world. And because we know that this is actually what the organizations and the community members are actually needing at the moment in the time of crisis. So I would say that how we are actually going to navigate around the crisis is actually the ability of adapting to the situations and be relevant to the community members, and try to navigate and try to communicate that to our donors and to our stakeholders, that this is actually what we need, and then we need to do some changes in the process of what we are going to achieve in the project that we are doing at the moment. Jackson, go back to you.
Thank you very much for that. Quite elaborate, and what really speaks out is how you went and gathered information on what is actually needed by your members, and and you let everything else be informed by that. And of course it came with challenges, like you have espoused. I would like to go to Sarah, perhaps picking up from there. There's a challenge that John Tasaragi has talked about in terms of when other organizations or other people came and asked for the same thing, and then the need was kind of hard to be able to address. Have you experienced the same thing, and how has that? How did you navigate that, if you have, or what challenges have you had as the leader of LEHA during this period in being able to steer or to lead the organization and the movement from where you are? Sarah, dropped off.
I'm so sorry. I think my phone froze for a minute. I didn't hear the question. Kindly repeat.
Okay, so the question is, how have you been able to navigate the situation individually as a leader? How have you been able to navigate the challenges that have come in during this pandemic? Because it has not been business as usual. Like has been pointed out, a bit of changes have needed to be made. So have you made similar changes or changes to be able to deal with the pandemic, and what impact has that had on you individually as a leader?
Yeah, so thank you for that, Jackson. So one of the ways I've been able to navigate around whatever has been happening was, first of all, I had to accept that there's something that's going on, and it's affecting my mental health. Because I remember when the pandemic hit sometime last year from March, it was really, really hard for me because I was undergoing through some mental breakdown, if I may call it like that. And what actually helped me through it was going through therapies, something I was so not really against, but it was really hard for me to even be faithful to my sessions. And just being able to at least get to understand what was going on, what was going on with me at that time. It gave me a sneak peek of what my people are going through, which actually encouraged me a lot to start start following up on some of the things that we were doing on mental health, such as having a psychosocial support group. That's something we've been having, mostly with the first responders of violence, which are also our peer educators, like the people who are at the forefront of handling cases or just dealing with the people, since we work at the grassroots levels. So mostly we work with people who we are in direct contact with. So for example, if I am going through a mental breakdown and I have a case that I need to attend to, because even if I am the director, I'm also a peer educator, and being a founder also of the organization, it has given me a chance to connect with people in a more personal way, and a good number of people actually come to me for services, since I also offer counseling, and the counseling services such as HIV. Like there's some of the things also that has encouraged me is talking to people, just getting to understand what is going on in different parts of the world, of Kenya, in, like, for example, in different areas of rural areas mostly. I just get to understand some of the issues that are going through there, since they are quite different, including religion. Religion is something that has been used time and again to justify the phenomena that are happening, or just as an escape. And in term last year, we had a case where the traditional religious leaders, they were passing out these informations that the homosexual community, or the suggest community of Kenya, they're the reason why the pandemic has come. And because of such sayings, such choice of words, it caused a lot of violence among the suggest community, especially LGBTQ community, which I work with. And so just being able to connect with people in different areas, in different parts of the world, has given me tools to adapt to some of the best practices I can borrow, which included also art therapy. Art therapy is something that we have borrowed, and it's working like really, really good in our spaces, because a good number of people we came to find out that we are not just dealing with the pandemic per se. We are also dealing with things like childhood traumas, which are being magnified by the pandemic, like, because now we cannot be able to move as such. You find yourself, you're more confined in the space of your home, and so you have to deal with things that you've been suppressing for a very long time. So just being able to understand what has been going on with me mentally has given me like a really useful tool, especially during this pandemic, for doing the programming. Also, it's not something easy, and so incorporating whatever I've been able to do personally to myself, such as even including check-ins, just drinking a lot of water, breathing, doing breathing exercises. These are things that have encouraged me, or they have given me another something to use as a tool during this pandemic. Over to you, Jackson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for sharing that story of that personal challenge. Just picking on that, some changes definitely have been made introspectively, and also in how we do things, looking outward. I'd like to ask you, John Kashiha, so what are some of the leadership perspectives or ways of looking at things that you had before that have been challenged during the pandemic, and how have you shifted?
Thank you, Jackson, and I'm sorry, technology, basically before technology. And definitely in regards to your question, there are so many things has been changed. And 2020 was the emotion roller coaster among the LGBTI community, globally, general community. So it was quite very straightforward in terms of the way we used to do things vis-a-vis the pandemic existence. In terms of the previous how we do things and what has been impacted around the pandemic, definitely as my previous panelist speaks that a lot of things has changed. I could speak around the programmatic facet that the program we used to do were not the same after the existence of the pandemic. For example, I'm talking about looking to health, accessing to the health services. And as you understand that there is a limitation around movement from one place to another. And around the LGBTI community was on the health, looking to those who have been infected with the HIV, whereby they have to attend the hospitals, they have to attend the health centers. It was quite very, very challenging, especially on the barrier to move from one place to another. However, Tanzania, we have been a little bit, I could say, lucky or in favor, and sometimes it's very confusing in terms of our strategy on how we tackle the pandemic in 2020. Definitely, we didn't have curfew. We didn't have a lockdown. We have a quite differently in terms of intervening with the pandemic. Sometimes it has helped, especially on a community member to able to access it to the health services, but due to restrictions within the information sharing and so on. And you can reveal that in 2020, till now, a lot of information has been shared, and it was quite very stressful, very depressed within the community member in which information to take and which one doesn't to take. But on how you took and are linking between the issues around the pandemic, struggling about your sexual orientation and the gender identity, come back to the society regards to discrimination, violence, and rejection within the society. You may find that LGBT has taken a very big load on how to address in the pandemic, but look into the issues around the poverty within the LGBT community, when actually most of the people are actually suffering about the job and so on, or most of them have been lost of their job. So how do they actually fit into the box within able to access it on the daily basis need, which previous were actually having it, but during the pandemic it was not. So in terms of the leadership, it was a moment where my leadership were actually very challenged, especially on providing the services to the community, but moreover, looking to yourself and looking to the people actually you are serving. It's quite a very strongly emotion in terms of on how you're addressing the issues. So for us, it was, for us or for myself, it was very difficult in terms of addressing the pandemic, or you starting addressing the emotion, mentality, and the physical depression where people they have before the pandemic. So it was a little bit kind of the challenging, but moreover, in terms of my leadership, thinking about the others, it was a little bit one of the concerning, rather than thinking of myself, like, okay, we have to think about the community. Do they have masks? Do they have this? Do they take in the precaution? Do they have the correct and simple information which actually are gathered in terms of having information around the access into the health services? And how do they accessing in terms of the services during this pandemic? It was good. I could give you one of the example. During the pandemic, actually, before the pandemic, most of the people were actually coming to take they were actually stored the ARV at our centers. But when the pandemic came in, they couldn't be able to store their ARV. And one of the major challenges, most of the health centers were actually limit some people to access it. They were actually avoiding the crowding and so on. So they have a very limited. And due to the vulnerability around the LGBTI community on the health setting, they could not be able to actually having a long stocking of the ARV. So the general community were actually given the very long intake of the ARV compared to the LGBTI community. So it was a very dramatic in terms of high discrimination where they actually perceiving within the health setting. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, John. That was very elaborate. Lorna, I think I would also put the same question to you and add another question. You know, some of the leadership perspectives that have changed or have been challenged during this time, but I would also add, you know, in line with this year's theme, you know, together, how can social change leaders use the crisis to bring about change, to bring about collaboration, positive impact in the lives of the people that we serve?
Thank you, Jackson. Your first question was around?
The same question. You know, what are some of the leadership perspectives that have changed or have been challenged during this period?
Okay, for me personally, I would say that the lockdown, the situation in Kenya threw me completely. It was, we had big plans. We had big plans for the way 2020 was going to unfold. It was all looking, you know, like it was going in a direction that we wanted it to go, and then bang, in came restrictions, in came lockdown, in came a whole host of things. And so the first thing there was to wrap my head around the fact that it's a 52 card pickup. All the cards that you have in a pack of cards were thrown up in the air, and it's a thing of, okay, now what are we picking and at what pace and what needs to be done? So reprioritizing everything. The ability to do that, I must admit, I have an excellent team, and we all pulled in our states because we were all thrown in different ways. And so we pulled in our states of being and perceiving what was happening and came up with measures that would see us through, at least. Because for me, the thing that was completely mind-blowing and boggling was the unpredictability. Okay, so do we wait? Do we hold off and it's going to change like in about 3 months, 6 months, whatever? Do we approach our funders and say, things are difficult, we have to rethink what it is we had planned to do with you in the first place? And so there are a vast number of things were taking place. Number one, I hadn't taken leave for a long time. And so this was almost like a rather dark mixed blessing, where I had the opportunity to regroup. John, would John like to say something? So to regroup, to ground, to rethink, to become way more flexible. And I discovered that, you know how we say, oh, wellness is a political act? Flexibility is just as political an act. And there aren't many leaders who have had the opportunity to unlearn previous ways of doing things and relearn a way more flexible way of getting things done. So right now, you'll still find organizations and individuals who are seeking to go back to the way it was. In my view, COVID came with a bag of lessons. And lesson number one was things change. Change is the only thing that's constant. Things change, change the way you think, change the way you do, change the way you approach, change everything. It's no longer going to be like that. Now we have a different way of doing things. Get relevant with that. So for me, relevance, I became a bit more IT savvy, where I used to hide behind age and say, no, I don't want to have to deal with tech and virtual things and whatever. And it compelled me to go down that road big time. Learn about Zoom, learn about the various platforms, learn about Google Meet, learn which has restrictions, which you can record, how to, So for me, it was a learning process around technology. It was a regrouping process where I had to deal with, number one, the depression of suddenly being locked up. It's like, okay, I don't mind that there's a health, I don't mind being locked up that there's a health pandemic, but I don't like being locked up that there's a health pandemic. So the removal of independence, the restrictions of liberty, we're already fighting oppression and restrictions of liberty through law. Now we have this. And so it was a lot to deal with. And so for me, it was basically grounding, regrouping, flexibility, and wellness critically, because not everyone deals with circumstances like that in like everyone else. So each one has a unique way of dealing with restrictions. I am very fortunate that I have a partner, and so my restriction and we get on, we get along, and so that confinement was not so much of a nightmare, where I'm aware that in other circumstances confinements have been very difficult. Going back home, like Sarah mentioned, having to go back home, facing homophobic families, dealing with that. Then if you and your partner aren't like on the same wavelength, the constantly being together, the fact that you can't earn a living, the fact that you've got needs to meet, being unable to meet those, anger comes in. Let me tell you, 2020 was a year of revelation, and 2021 is like, that's what these revelations are. Let's deal with this. Let's deal with this. This is where resilience comes in. This is what it looks like. We have lived, so in my view, we have lived such traumatic, damaged, harmed lives that this is a thing of, if it's not going to be human related and it's going to be environmental related, we've got the wherewithal, the strength, the courage, the bravery to face unbelievable obstacles and come through them. And so it's hard. We instituted, as part of our programming, we instituted telecounseling, because we saw, so there's several things that we did. The first thing was we instituted remote working. The second thing that we did a needs assessment within our membership and found a list of things that were common across all the members. Third thing we had conversations with all our funders around existing grants and the fact that it would not be possible to move that fund the way we had initially anticipated. Therefore, we were now going to rethink, and we wanted their approval to meet the things that had come out of our needs assessment, which were difficult things. The next thing we did was we beefed up our security system. So because look, in the absence of state security for LGBTIQ plus people in Kenya, we've all heard the ruling in 2019, which threw us to the wolves. So we have our own security system where we respond to reports of violations based on perceived or known sexual orientation, gender identity, the works. So we beefed that up because now under restriction, you have individuals who've been doing this work and who've been doing this work in a fairly unconstrained environment have to now do it under restrictions. So we augmented their benefits. Then we also gave out, because some of our funders were agreeable, and we were able to convert the stagnant, I call it stagnant funding, because we wouldn't have been able to spend it, not knowing when to spend it, not knowing when this thing would be over. So we converted some of the stagnant funds into COVID relief. And we gave very modest, we've got what, 17 members. And so it wasn't like we were giving trillions and trillions of money. It was very small pockets of money for our member organizations to, if they didn't have their own sources of COVID relief support, this would just give them a push so that it could take care of some of the things that they needed, like PPEs, information, relief, actual relief for individuals who had lost their jobs, who couldn't pay rent, who couldn't.
Yeah, and I like that point that you made, that there's something you said about looking at our funders and thinking, do we shift the funds that we have? You know, do we ask if we can shift the funds that we have to deal with those things that you just said? And as you're saying that, I could see John Tasaragi nodding, and I also had John earlier mentioned something similar. So perhaps let me take on that point, let me take that bit back to John Tasaragi and your experience with that. I know you highlighted it. Was there any form of resistance? How was that experience in talking to your funders and saying, this is the situation, this is not what we planned, it doesn't fit very well into the log frame matrix that we had at the beginning of the project, but this is what we have. How was that experience for you?
Right, Jackson. I would like to actually second what Lorna has already stated earlier, that it was actually, well, to some funders, it was a lot easier actually to explain to them that we cannot really do this. Hey, this is what happened, and you also experienced this, and then we need to change this. We need to shift what we were supposed to do something else. Otherwise, our community members will die on the streets. They will not have anything to pay their rent. Some of them are even lost their jobs. But then some of the funders, I don't want to mention them, actually require further analysis, proof, evidence, and then we need to provide that. And it's actually a huge work to do that, because we are also dealing with, the mental emotions, problems of our community members, and then we need to somehow provide and justify the changes that we wanted to make to all donors and funders. So it's actually creating another problem to your head. And then in other scenario, you have also to deal with your own self well-being as well. So sometimes all the burdens are actually centered on your mind. And given the fact back then you were actually locked up in your room and you couldn't really go out because of the restrictions or because of your being scared of going out and contracted with the virus. But then, eventually sometimes you have to make do with whatever you could do at the end of the day, and then try to survive and try to do whatever you can actually do, and then meet as many as Zoom meeting as possible with your donors and prove them that this is the thing that we need to do. And eventually some of the donors are actually understanding that these are the things that we need to do, and this is the relevant things that we need to urgently do if we want it to be relevant to the community members, because this is not an ordinary an ordinary situations. This is extraordinary. This is not expected. So we need to be able to somehow adjust what we are doing to be able to, you know, we do understand that policy advocacy is really important, but then how can you advocate for policy changes if you cannot really feed your tummy, if you cannot really pay your bills, if you cannot pay your accommodation? So which one goes first? So I would really second again what Lorna has already said. We needed to reprioritize what needs to be done first before the others. Over to you, Jackson.
Thank you very much. It seems that, you know, so this has been happening throughout 2020. In 2021, hopefully things have eased up, but surely, like you said, you mentioned policy advocacy, and I immediately thought about, you know, Center and John Kashiha. And I know Center's main front is first policy advocacy, then, you know, there's also a bit of, you know, service delivery. But in this situation where our movement organizations have had to now concentrate on the humanitarian aspect of things, you know, with the shifts that we've been talking about, the different ways that we need to do things, is there any thought that moving forward, adapting to this new normal, that perhaps ways of dealing with that humanitarian assistance that our community has needed continue? Has there been any thought of how to do that? Knowing that it's very expensive. During a crisis, yes, you need to help people get food. You need to help people be able to find a roof over their head, access medicines. But we know how expensive that is on a very short period of time. What plans do we have for that going forward? The pandemic is not yet over. Our communities are still among the most economically disempowered people. How do we do that, especially for organizations whose previous focus has been policy advocacy? John Kashiha.
Okay, thank you so much, Jackson. That is a very important question, and I think it's something we need as a regional, sub-regional, to synergy on that. But definitely on my response will be, first of all, technology will be vital, especially on taking the advocacy part vis-a-vis the humanitarian into consideration. As you understand that the world has quickly shifted from response to the on the table issues, which are was quite very differently to humanitarian issues. So I think it's a time to see the potential around integrated the advocacy part within the humanitarian, because the pandemic will still continue. The pandemic will still be there, and we, apart from having these new improvement of vaccination and so on, but the pandemic will still be there. So it will be part of our life. So we need to find a way of integrated the advocacy part and humanitarian work. That is number one. But number two is collaboration between ourselves as activists, as a human rights defender, as allies in the government. How do we collaborating together in to make sure that things we put into consideration are actually bringing the changes we are looking for? Because working as a team is quite very strongly, and it can bring a lot of changes within the society, but moreover bringing other people inside within the LGBT community, whereby they can able to push the agenda, they can be able to push the issues within at the forefront, but moreover to make the LGBT community and the center of the conversation, whereby they could channel their issues within different within different platforms and so on. But moreover, we need also the flexibility of the donors, because as you heard from our previous speakers, they are mentioned around the redirecting of the funds was how difficult it was actually be, especially on channeling the fund from the previous work plan to the humanitarian work, is still a very big challenges. And it is still a very big problematic within the donor facet, within the entire facet of the LGBTI community, but moreover within the philanthropists who are actually funding the organization. So we needed the flexibility, we needed the donors to understand what we have been experiencing on the ground and how can be impacted. So putting the LGBTI at the center of the conversation within the funding could be very important. But moreover, looking on how we can allocate the budget around the humanitarian so that it cannot, the fund which are actually supporting the advocacy work could not be interrupted. Because what I can see now, the big portion of the advocacy party is actually divided into pieces to support the humanitarian. So at the end of the day, you will find that a lot of advocacy work funding could not fit into advocating for and to advocate and to the advocacy part, rather will be directed on the humanitarian issues. So that is something which we actually are looking to experience, especially on 2015 and 2021, on redirecting on the issues to support the humanitarian work. But moreover, economic crisis will also be part of the obstacles within our work, within the region, or within our countries, or within wherever. Because most of the donors from their countries, they will allocate a lot of budgeted to actually to intervene in the pandemic within the countries. So you may find that within the African countries, will actually experience a lot of economic crisis and the dropping of the funding from the compared to 2020 or to 2019 to 2021. So most of the funding will be remaining on the donors, maybe countries, and a lot of to support to actually addressing the pandemic within the countries or within the localities. So
thank you.
It's a little bit a snapshot. Over to you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Before we go to question and answer, I would like to bring in Sarah on something that they mentioned. Sarah, you mentioned something around pronouncement by religious leaders. And so my question to you is there any hope in making religious leaders into allies? Is there any hope in turning those people who have previously, actively done things that are to the detriment of the well-being of our communities, to turn them into forces for good? Has there been any instances that you have experienced or that you know of that this has happened, and how do you think that has gone?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that question. It's still a very tricky area for us, because mostly the kind of leaders we're dealing with, the traditional leaders. And when you're looking at the traditions and cultures, a good number of us were quote unquote the millennials. So there's this notion that we are still young in the community and we do not know about our cultures, and this kind of talks, they kind of throw us off the track. Even if you make a small, what do you call it, a step forward, when you have this conversation, especially when the elders are involved, you at times feel like you are not well covered with the information. And we are noticing that information is everything, especially in this generation, in this era. And so on the hope, we are using the people who are in our midst. Like, for example, if we know you are a queer, you're a queer pastor, and we are having maybe a religious talk, we make sure that you're involved there so that you can also give your inputs as a leader as a religious leader in your age bracket or with your peers. And also something else that's coming up mostly when we are talking about religious allies and stuff like that is the, can I say, the backstabbing that is in the like it's in the clergy. Like for example, you'll find out that if you are a member in that you serve in a certain church and you have money, so that means you have status in the church. And so even if you're queer, that's something that's not spoken as much. But when you are a queer person, you're youth and you are not employed, that means you don't have monetary capacity. So that means you are an abomination and you're not even allowed to talk or just give input. So mostly what Leha is doing around this conversation is we're taking it as an issue and we are recognizing it is an issue, because religion is also something that it's also like one of the pillars that are used to, they shouldn't be used, but they are used to make laws and regulations even in churches. And so what we are doing is we are giving a lot of people, like we are giving our members information around religion. We're giving, because we've also come to find out that because of how discriminatory the church is or the religions are, a good number of the social community, they are moving away from that, which means that's also supposed to be like a recording crisis, because I do not know what will become of a human race without faith. So what we are doing is just making sure that our members are well equipped with the information. So we have days where we are teaching people about our traditions that are revolving around traditional African societies, so that when they're having conversations, not just around religion, when they're having conversations with other elderly people, it becomes easier for them to articulate themselves in their own languages, in their own cultures, so that they can be able to express themselves some more. But on the allyship, I personally do not think we're making a huge impact on the allyship, because for as long as there is ill motives, which mostly is money, the conversations, in these gatherings where we have, as long as there are those transport reimbursement, as long as there are those sitting allowances, or just any form of reimbursement, for me, I don't feel like these conversations are going to take flight, because these are conversations that should be had because they're supposed to, and because they are necessary. These are not conversations that should be had because we think it is the time. It's always been the time. So I don't know when people are saying it's not yet time for us to have these conversations. I don't know when. I don't know how many people we are supposed to lose in the social community, so that the religious leaders can take this as as part of a crisis in the society. So mostly whatever we're doing is mostly just in our capability we are ensuring our members they are having good information, reliable information. We are having these conversations with even other people, including leaders in other churches. So yes, this is something that's need a lot of work, and yes, a lot of work is also happening in the rural areas.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. You say something that's really powerful and will always be powerful. Information is power. In a pandemic situation where everything is going online, more and more movements are interacting on the social media platforms. You're only able to meet your members on the social media platform using relevant hashtags. In this day and age where everybody has their own frequency, your social media will always show you what is relevant to you. And it will continue to do that, building on your interests. I'm assuming that cancel culture has an impact on that. And and this is not a question, this is just for thought, and I think it might come up in the question and answer. How do we keep knowledge of those people who are actively doing things against us if through algorithms and cancel culture we've been able to remove them from our social media feeds, or if you're not able to interact with them? How do we know? How do we find those ones that can be turned from red to amber to green, that we can bring them back if they're not part of our social media feeds? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's, when you said that, that's something that just really screamed out to me. But I think we move to the question and answer section, and I would ask Olympia if you can help us take those questions.
Yes, I think we have a question from Shibolo, which I have now unmuted.
Yes, hello, colleagues, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
All right, thank you, yes. So thank you, Jackson, and all the panelists. All your input indeed is very enriching. I will have 3 questions. I don't know the questions or the comments, but I'll put them right there. Yeah, so to Jonta, please forgive me if I do pronounce your name not so correctly, but Jonta, if you're there, you did mention something to do with funders, trying to talk to funders to make the funding flexible to meet the needs of the time, especially during the pandemic, and some funders were not that flexible. Well, that's quite an issue, but I also have a question to ask around there. How about instances where you do not necessarily have the funders who are already funding your project? You simply need for those issues, because quite a background that I lead the Robust Initiative for promoting human rights triumphs Uganda, and we've not had funders who have ongoing projects per se, so we cannot ask them, for example, to change the funding, to move it to fund the COVID issue. So is that the problem that you or other colleagues have faced? Like they already don't have funding flowing in that they want to change to meet the needs of the time. Then to, of course, colleagues close by, I'm in Uganda, and I know you're in Kenya, Tanzania, and the neighboring countries. So my question here is, in 2020 and even right now, we saw in countries like in Uganda where we had human rights persecutions directly targeted at the LGBTIQ+ community, and even including criminalization, like it's happening right now in May 3rd this year. We had criminalization passed by the Parliament of Uganda, specifically targeting LGBTIQ+ community that we are trying to fight right now. In your respective countries, is this something that also has happened? Like, I know, yes, there were laws, for example, against the laws that are aimed at preventing the spread of COVID, but are there particular laws or policies that were passed in your countries targeting the LGBTIQ community during the pandemic? And finally, to end with Kagendo, you did bring in a perspective of religious blackmail, and if you allow me to introduce there a new term, which I would call privilege, because it has happened quite a lot where we see, indeed, like you said, in churches and mosques, the LGBTIQ community who hold position in society, either in terms of their economic wellness or even being a leader somewhere, not as seen as okay, but when it comes to community members who are not privileged enough, lack the education, have no financial means, are the ones that are siphoned out and treated with a dose of discrimination. So that's something that's been happening here and there. And what I wanted to add to that, Kagendo, was an idea for me here, and what we're doing here is that we are encouraging now those LGBTIQ individuals who are so privileged, so to put it, to be a voice for the less privileged. For example, I'm a lawyer by training in my community. When I speak to religious leaders, many of them get me in the sense of being a lawyer, but also I use that opportunity to speak against the discrimination that is being focused on the transgender woman in the community who has no such privilege as I have myself. And then one last thing before we go on to religious blackmail, I want to encourage panelists here that now is the time when our communities need to have people called role models. And role models contextual here is that people who are already seen by the would-be problematic people, blackmailers, people who are homophobic. When you look at people in the community that indeed they respect, that have respect the community, and they treat them as people of privilege. In that case, when they come out as role models, it has a very high impact in the community. So possibly this is an area you want to explore going forward. Jackson and panelists, again, many thanks. I am Sean in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, thank you for the question in there and for the shared insights. So I would ask, I think some question was directed at Sarah. But any of the panelists, if you have something to say, you can take like 30 seconds to just give your input. So Sarah, and then I'm seeing John Tasaragi also nodding, which I think means that you would like to answer a question. And then Lorna and John, please feel free to also chip in after them. So 30 seconds.
So I think mine was an input that I was getting on how I can go around religious leaders that, and Shibola has said that I can use the already quote unquote again this privileged Sojus community in the religious sector to act as ambassadors when we're having conversations around the religious leaders or around religion. But now again, it's also good to know that the kind of religion I was talking about is not the modern one. It is the traditional one, which a good number of young people we are not part of, and which we do not know even the doctrines of this religion. And so that is why it is usually used to what can I say, to like block our work or to just bring problems or something like that, because this is also the religion that's used to pass a lot of myths and misconceptions around the Gikuyu people of Kenya who are Sojus. So this is also something that maybe I would look into, though I highly doubt, because also this is a religion that encourages trigger alert. This is going to be a trigger alert to some of us. It's also a religion that encourages, or that is usually FGM pro, and also this is something we are trending carefully in, because again, where we work in, this is it's something that's it's one of the hindrances that we're getting. And so this is also like, if there's someone who has an input on how I can go around the traditional African religion, I can appreciate it. But also, Shibolo, thank you. That's also something I'm going to use on when we're having maybe a religious leaders meeting or something.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. I know we wouldn't be able to handle all the questions. So Jonta, Saraji.
Well, right. I'm not sure if I got the question right, but then I'll try to address the thing that I've got that I could hear when the question was raised. So I think it actually can work both sides. I mean, like shifting the current funding that we had is still possible, even though as Lorna has already said earlier, that it could be difficult, but then I do not say that it's not possible. It is still possible to be done, as long as we can provide the requirements of evidence, information, and quick survey or research to support the shifting or the reprogramming of the current program that we had. And also advocating for new projects as well to the potential donors is also possible. And we've seen that. For example, like in Indonesia, we managed to somehow secure some funding, around 1.5 million euros from the EU Indonesia, to support the the COVID to provide COVID response emergency needs to all minority groups, including LGBTIQ groups or the religious minority groups and stuff like that. So it is still possible as long as we can maintain the communications with the potential funders that we know of and inform them what is the situations, because that was actually what happened during the COVID hit our communities. Actually, the funders themselves, they are not always bad. Sometimes they are really eager to know what happens at the grassroots level communities, and then we just simply provide them with the actual informations, and we just need to provide them with the actual research, actual studies that are actually happening within our communities, and then recommending the actions that needs to be done in order to be able for them to be relevant to our constituents. I guess that is more than 30 seconds already. Jackson, over to you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So Lorna, I will have a different question for you to answer before we close. So Christine Namatovu, I believe there's a question from Christine Namatovu.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jackson. My name is Christine. I'm from Uganda. I work with the Voice Project in Uganda, and a number of our colleagues are on the call, and we appreciate the discussions. I like the discussion around faith and the LGBTI community. I think that is something that we may need to investigate further and to see how best we can work with the religious people. I mean, I'm using the religious people because a number of people claim to be religious, and see how we can turn them into champions amidst the challenge of them being against a few things that we believe in. Then the idea of creation of safe spaces in the respective places that we are. Here in Uganda, we recognize that the law indeed may not be on our side, but as a project, we believe that we need to find ways of navigating our way around it, that LGBTI community members still have a right to practice what they need to practice amidst the constraining circumstances. How can we ensure that we create safe spaces of engagement? And how do we guard against the backstabbing within the community itself, where you find that the community itself is playing against itself. And when you do further investigation, you find that actually what is coming out is a tip-off from a member of a community that you have a meeting somewhere. So how do we promote safe spaces and ensure that we are able to have work going on amidst constraining laws and environments? Would like to ask that from the panelists. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Christine. Unfortunately, we don't have panelists, any panelists from Uganda. We shall be having a session on Thursday, which I believe we shall have panelists from Uganda, and that question can be deferred from there. But if there's any reflection on that question, or I would like to give Lorna an opportunity. You wanted to say something about, I think, the previous question, and maybe you can do that as we close out on this particular Q&A.
It was just a quick one in response to, because Sibolo is the name. I hope I've got that right. Shibolo had spoken about in the absence of funding. What do you do in the absence of funding? So you've got no funding, there's nobody supporting your work and hasn't been supporting your work for a period of time. And so now COVID has happened, and so what do you do? Because there's no one you can talk to redirect funding. Shibola, the question then would be the kind of networks within which you belong. For us here in Kenya, when we receive calls for applications, because the Gay and Lesbian Coalition of Kenya receives calls for applications, receives all manner of things. And the first thing we do as a coalition is we circulate that information to our members, so that if there is information that is of interest to them, they are at liberty to take that up themselves. So, if you are part of any wider network. It would be great if your network was the type of network that had the mandate to strengthen capacity, and strengthening capacity is not trainings. You know, it's not trainings and curricula. It's opportunities, funding opportunities, resources, people, bringing information about people, connecting people, bringing people to spaces where they can get connected. And so that's one way in which we have done stuff. And if you're from Uganda, you are from Uganda, I would be surprised that you would not have received a call from a grant maker such as Uhai, for example, that put out an open call with flexible funding for all organizing in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, DRC, Ethiopia, and I think also South Sudan. So it depends on who you're communicating with. Like Jackson said, you may be in a situation where you're not communicating with people who would share that kind of information with you. And perhaps it would be up to you to also reach out and find. So the online spaces, there's lots of information out there about who is funding what. Around shifting funding, another thing that we're working on going forward is that whole flexibility and getting the funders to be flexible around reserves, because they too have been hit with this. They've suddenly found that all the people that they have been partnering with are suddenly up in the air and have nowhere to go. And so even so we're having conversations, discussions with and among funders in order to shift the parameters of funding, because you couldn't use foreign exchange gains. You couldn't put away, if you did not spend it all, you couldn't put it away in a place for it to gain sort of like momentum and start generating its own income. You had to spend it on whatever it was you said you were going to spend it on. And that's what has choked a lot of organizing on this continent. And so hopefully, Shibolo, that answers your question. Number one, the communities in which you circulate, surely there are organizations within those communities that share information, because that's how you grow. You have kindness, caring, sharing. So you share information so that everyone can try their hand. And in the event that a thing didn't work, we simply, as the Coalition of Kenya, we simply said, these are our members, round one, here's a small amount of money, go and do what you want. Or go and do what is, not what you want, but what is needed.
What is needed.
Yes.
What we need. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you for that. I would like to bring back Levis to close out for us and tell us about the next plans. I know there's a lot of questions that people wanted to ask, but Levis will tell us how that will happen.
Thank you everyone. This has been one of the best virtual meetings I've ever attended in a long time. I mean, it's really hard to keep people together for that long of a time. We want to thank the speakers of the day. We want to thank our supporters, the Canadian High Commission, Australian High Commission. We want to thank the Dutch Embassy. We want to thank Hivos. We want to thank Voice for their kind support and to enable us having this conversation. I want to thank all of you for finding time to come. Our panelists, you guys were incredibly amazing. I don't know where we found you, but we found you. Thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you, Jackson, for the wonderful moderation. Thank you, Olympia, for facilitating the tech side of things. And every single person who has worked behind the scenes, the teams that we've worked with, I want to really thank you all for that engagement. And I just wanted to say that we do have a celebration really on Thursday, and our tech support has sent us an Eventbrite link. If you don't have it, have a look at it. Register for that event. It will be more entertainment, more relaxed. I will not have a coat. Probably I'll have a t-shirt or a tank top. And we're inviting all of you guys on Thursday at the same time, 2:30, to join us in really celebrating IDAHOT. But I want to thank you again for finding time from your busy schedules during a weekday to come and celebrate this IDAHOT event on togetherness and supporting each other and healing together and calling on our donors to really flex those funds, and I am lost for words, but for me, it's just gratitude. Thank you so much. God bless you all. And I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday. Asanteni sana.